So before I actually begin teaching you all about quantum mechanics, I thought I'll just tell you why there was a need for quantum mechanics, right? Basically, by 1900, okay, there was already classical mechanics which explained the dynamics of different particles, right? How the particles move, what trajectory it follows. Newton's laws of motion was already there, and that explained all of the motion of the particles. Then there were electromagnetic Maxwell's laws of electromagnetism, and that explained all the characteristics about waves. Okay. And then, of course, thermodynamics was also part of classical mechanics. So it explained all the macroscopic properties or bulk properties of matter, such as volume, temperature, heat, and all of that. So, so by 1900, we already had a lot of physics, which explained a lot of different things or a lot of different properties about the various objects that we encountered in our daily life. So then what is the need for quantum mechanics, right? So quantum mechanics is something that arose or that uh, came up when people started looking at microscopic particles, right? Particles which are at the scale of electrons, atoms, nucleus, and so on. So let's just go. So by the beginning of 20th century, there were some phenomena, some experiments were done using electrons, using nucleus, using atoms, which was difficult to explain using these uh, classical mechanics or the Maxwell's laws of electromagnetism. Okay, and these phenomena fell into two specific domains. One was relativistic domain. Okay, so relativistic domain was when there are particles which approach the speed of light. Those particles could not really be explained by classical mechanics, and that gave rise to Einstein's theory of relativity. Okay, this was in 1905. Then there was obviously microscopic domain, right, which I've already told you. So when people started looking at structure of atoms, structure of nucleus, then they found out electrons, protons, and all of these. Then they realized that classical mechanics again failed to explain the structure as well as the phenomena associated with these particles. So that gave rise to, of course, then people started thinking, what is the theory that can explain all of this? So some of these phenomena, some of these experiments that people performed were related to black body radiation. Then one was photoelectric effect. Then there was atomic stability, atomic spectroscopy type of experiments where people deciphered the structure of an atom, right? So all these s, p, d, f orbitals inside an atom was discovered. And then there were other experiments such as Compton effect. So all of these, I'm going to talk about all of this in detail. But the point is, all of these experiments led to some phenomena, and those phenomena could not be explained just by using classical mechanics. So then there was a need for developing something new. So the first person to develop something new related to this was Max Planck. Okay, so Max Planck first tackled the black body radiation problem. Okay, so I'll of course talk about in detail what the black body radiation problem is. But just to give you a brief, black body radiation is basically the thermal electromagnetic radiation that any object emits. Okay, so that is the black body radiation. So there was a certain curve associated or certain nature of the energy spectrum, and that energy spectrum could not be explained just by using classical mechanics. So Max Planck came up with the idea that, okay, so of course there is some interaction between the electromagnetic radiation and the object itself. So Max Planck came up with the idea that, okay, maybe the interaction between the electromagnetic radiation and the object, that interaction happens when the energy exchange between these two things is not continuous but happens in discrete bits. So what are these discrete bits? These discrete bits are n, h, nu. Okay, so h nu is a bit of energy, right? Like a discrete bit of energy. And the number of these bits is defined by n. Okay, So n can be 0, 1, 2. Of course, if it is 0, then no energy is exchanged. If it is 1, then 1 bit of energy is exchanged, and 1 bit corresponds to h nu, right? So h is, at that time, h was known as some universal constant. Later, we started calling it as Planck's constant. Okay, and nu is the frequency of the electromagnetic radiation. So he realized that if he used this sort of if he made this sort of assumption about the energy exchange, then he could explain the black body radiation. So this was a major breakthrough. Okay, so obviously Planck got a Nobel Prize for this. So since this was a major breakthrough and since this explained very well the black body radiation, then Einstein also thought, okay, maybe he could also use this concept. So what he proposed was that now this bit of energy is also corresponds to 1 bit of photon. So photons are also, light is also made up of discrete bits, and these discrete bits are called photons. Okay. And so using this same type of idea, he could explain the photoelectric effect. Now, what is photoelectric effect? It is nothing but if you irradiate a metal, okay, with some electromagnetic radiation, some electrons are emitted out of it. Okay, so that number of electrons and what the kinetic energy of electrons are and all of that, all of that related to the electron could be explained using the same theory that light or the electromagnetic radiation is made up of bits of energy, which is NH nu. Okay. So then in 1911, so of course now this idea was gaining traction, right? That energy has to be written in terms of NH nu. So these are integral multiples of h nu, right? So n is an integral multiple, so it is 0, 1, 2, or 3. So this h nu, so integral multiple of h nu is what equals to energy. So this idea was gaining traction. So then in 1911, Rutherford discovered the atomic nucleus. So, okay, once the atomic nucleus was discovered, then someone had to also look at what the nature of that nucleus was. So then Bohr combined these Rutherford model, atomic model, and Planck's quantum concept, that is the fact that E is equal to NH nu, and of course Einstein's photons, and proposed the hydrogen model. Okay. So in the hydrogen model, one important idea or theory that he proposed was that the atom exists in discrete energy states. Okay, and the absorption or absorption or emission between those energy states happens in integral multiples of h nu, right, in discrete amounts. So again, the NH nu concept is coming up. Okay, so once the hydrogen model was explained, right, once the hydrogen model was proposed and it was experimentally verified, then people could see what is the explanation behind the spectroscopic measurements of hydrogen model. Okay. Then again in 1923, okay, Compton discovered that when you scatter X-rays, okay, with electron, then electron behaves like a wave, okay, because you see these interference patterns. So, okay, so X-rays behave like particles with momenta h nu by c. All right. So when scattering X-rays with electrons, X-ray photons behave like particles. So that was another concept that Compton discovered. So again, you are seeing that h nu is coming into play. Then again in 1923, de Broglie postulated that not only the particles behave, not only radiation or light behaves like particles, but also particles behave like waves. Okay, so this was again confirmed by two specific experiments. One was the experiment by Davison and Germer, where they showed that when you scatter electrons from a nickel crystal or something, you can see the interference pattern of the electron. That means that electron is showing the interference pattern, which means electron is behaving like a wave. Then again, Thomson also showed a similar experiment where he passed electrons through a polycrystalline film, and there also he could see these interference patterns of electrons. So again, all of this confirmed that electrons are behaving like waves. So then people not only did the same kind of experiment with electrons, but they did it with other microscopic particles as well, such as protons or atoms or and all those other particles. Okay, and all of those showed that those particles behave like waves. Okay, so obviously, all of these are really important developments in that era, okay, which led to the development of quantum mechanics. So far Planck and Einstein, they had kind of used they had just assumed that energy is equal to nh nu and come up with the various models and equations associated with the various experiments. But it lacked some type of consistency. So then Heisenberg, okay, so Heisenberg and Schrodinger, these two people laid down the theoretical foundation. So they made like step by step, they kind of derived these equations, sort of. Okay, so that you could understand what is the basis of these equations and what is the basis of using E equal to nh nu. All right, so Heisenberg, what he did was, Heisenberg used the matrix method. Okay, so he formulated quantum mechanics in terms of matrix mechanics. So he wrote matrices and vectors for all of the energy and properties and operators. But what Schrodinger did was he used the wave mechanics, meaning that he used the wave equation. So continuous differential equation is what Schrodinger used. Okay. So these two people developed the quantum mechanics independently of each other. All right. But then people initially thought, okay, these two are completely different things. One is in terms of matrices and the other one is in terms of continuous differential equations. Okay. But then Dirac later showed that these two methods, these two approaches are actually the same. So they represent the same kind of particles, but they are just two different approaches to arrive at the same thing. Okay. So in 1928, Dirac combined special relativity and quantum mechanics to derive an equation that describes the motion of electrons. So this was again a major breakthrough. And using this equation, he predicted that there is a new particle, or there is an existence of an antiparticle of electron, which is a positron. Okay, so this was predicted by Dirac in 1928, and then positron was discovered in 1932. So obviously Dirac got a Nobel Prize for this prediction. Okay, so this you can see that within 30 years, right, from 1900 to 1932, 35, I mean, everything happened so fast. So many new things were discovered, so many new particles were discovered, so many new theories were developed. All the different experiments which were not explained by classical mechanics or electromagnetism were now starting to be explained by using quantum mechanics. So this period from 1900 to 1930, 1935, this period is very important in the history of quantum mechanics, because this is when all of these theories were developed. And it wasn't developed just because people wanted to develop, it was developed because there was a need for it. All the older theories were not able to explain certain phenomena. And so there was a need to develop this new theory, which combined the particle nature and the wave nature in one, right? So these two things which are completely different from each other, these were combined into one. Okay, so just to give you an idea, so quantum mechanics, so I've been talking about that quantum mechanics holds for microscopic particles. So what I mean is that quantum mechanics holds for particles which have size near or less than 1 nanometer. Okay, so if the size of a particle is less than or comparable to 1 nanometer, then you definitely cannot ignore the effects of quantum mechanics or the properties that quantum mechanics will elucidate. Okay, so with that, now we come to the actual problems. Okay, so the actual problem here was that there were some experiments, right, which kind of showed that classical mechanics failed to explain those experiments. Okay, so that is what we will start with first. So we'll start with the particle aspect of radiation, which means that we are trying to say that if you have a radiation or if you have a light of a certain wavelength, certain frequency, then there is a particle aspect to that light. Okay, that's what we mean. All right, so now let's see what does classical physics tell you about a particle. Okay, so according to classical physics, a particle is characterized by energy and momentum. Okay, and a wave is characterized by amplitude and wave vector. Right, wave vector includes the wavelength lambda or the frequency if you write it as 2 pi nu. Right. All right, so these two things, right? These two things are completely separate from each other in classical physics. Okay. Right. So according to classical physics, particles and waves exhibit entirely different behaviors, and the properties are mutually exclusive. Also, according to classical physics, any amount of energy can be exchanged between waves and particles, meaning there is a continuous exchange of energy. So it doesn't happen in discrete bits, but it happens in continuous, there is a continuous exchange of energy. Okay, this is according to classical physics. Okay, but these concepts do not hold in quantum mechanics, meaning these concepts do not hold in the microscopic scale, right, where quantum mechanics is applicable. All right. So these concepts, using these concepts of classical physics, one could not explain black body radiation, photoelectric effect, and Compton effect. All right. And these three indicate particle aspects of radiation. So we look at each of these three one by one, and then you'll understand what I mean by particle aspect of radiation. Okay, so let's start with black body radiation. All right. So what is black body radiation? So when you heat a solid, okay, the object will glow and emit thermal radiation. So as you increase the temperature, the object will also change color. Okay, first it might become red, then it will become yellow, then it will become white. So as you keep on increasing the temperature. Okay, so this thermal radiation, okay, that is emitted by glowing solid objects, consists of a continuous distribution of frequency. So there is a continuous distribution of frequency ranging from UV to IR. Okay, but this is different from when you look at thermal radiation emitted by heated gases. So when you look at thermal radiation emitted by heated gases, then you will see that there is a discrete distribution in the spectrum. Okay, I'll show you what a spectrum is. I'll show you in a moment what I mean by a spectrum. But there will be a discrete distribution of spectrum if you look at the radiation emitted by heated gases. So discrete distribution means it will be some few lines, okay, and there will be no line in between. So there will be a lot of empty space, and then there will be some lines like that. So that is a discrete distribution of a spectrum. So when radiation falls on a solid object, what happens is some of that radiation gets absorbed by the object and some of it will be reflected back, or will be emitted back into the environment. Okay. Now, an ideal black body is a material that absorbs all radiation that falls on it. Okay. So if it absorbs all radiation that falls on it, so when you shine light on that black body, it will appear black. That's why it's called a black body. Okay, because it has absorbed all radiation, so that it is not emitting anything out. Okay, so it is completely black if you illuminate it from outside. Now, if you heat the object, okay, if you heat the object, it should radiate electromagnetic energy. Okay. And obviously, like a perfect idealized black body, what it will do is it will emit out as much energy as it absorbed. So if it absorbed all of the energy, then it will also radiate back all the energy if you heat the object. That is an idealized black body. So when this object is heated, it radiates electromagnetic energy because why? Because of thermal agitation of electrons on its surface. So the electrons are going to oscillate, okay, because you're heating up the surface. So the electrons on the surface of it are going to oscillate slightly, and they will oscillate at different frequency. Each electron might oscillate at a different frequency. Okay, but electrons are going to oscillate. So there is some thermal agitation, which means that electrons will oscillate, and that creates a emission of this electromagnetic energy. So intensity of this energy, right? This depends on its frequency and on the temperature. That is, the light that it emits ranges over the entire spectrum. Okay. So let's look at it. So an object in thermal equilibrium with its surroundings radiates as much energy as it absorbs. I've already told you this. Therefore, black body is a perfect absorber as well as a perfect emitter of radiation. Right? I already told you this. So this is what the spectrum looks like. Okay, so this is the spectral energy density U of nu comma T versus frequency. So spectral energy density is nothing but the intensity. Okay, intensity, it's related to the intensity of light. So if you look at the electromagnetic radiation at a certain frequency, then you will see that there will be some intensity of light at a certain temperature. Okay, so at different temperature, the intensity of the light will vary, and that is why your spectral energy density is varying. Okay, so there are things that you can see from this graph now. Okay, so at a fixed temperature, so let's say T equal to 2000 Kelvin, at this temperature, your spectral energy density has a plot which is first increasing and then decreasing with increasing frequency. Okay. Now at T equal to 3000 Kelvin, you see that the maximum, at 2000 Kelvin, the maximum was over here. The maximum of this spectral energy density was over here. And at 3000 Kelvin, the maximum is over here. At 4000, the maximum is here. At 5000 Kelvin, the maximum is over here. So you can see that the maximum is shifting, right? And also that the spectral energy density is increasing, right, with increasing temperature, right? So this is what the spectral energy density looks like with nu. So this is the experiment that people performed. What they did was they looked at, they fixed the temperature, and for different frequencies, they measured the intensity of light radiated by the black body, okay? And then they plotted it. And after they plotted it, they saw this is the pattern that you observe. Okay, this is how the graph looks like. So with increasing temperature, the maximum, the frequency at which spectral energy density is maximum, that shifts. And also the spectral energy density becomes higher and higher with increasing, right? These are the things. Now, obviously, if I were to plot U of nu comma T instead of U of nu comma T, if I were to plot U of lambda comma T with respect to lambda, what would I see? I would see that with increasing temperature, the peak would have shifted to the left, right? Because there is an inverse relationship between nu and lambda. Now, because I'm plotting this with respect to nu, that's why the peak is shifting towards the right. If I had plotted it with respect to lambda, peak would have shifted towards the left. Okay, so that is something that you can remember intuitively. All right. So this is the curve that people wanted to explain. So this is the black body radiation experiment, and this is the black body theory that people want to come up with. Okay, so how do you explain this curve? That is something that people wanted to see. Okay, but before that, how do you create a black body? So black body is an idealized system. Okay, in practicality, you can't really create a very perfect absorber and emitter, but you can try to make it as ideal as possible. So one way to do that is you have a hollow object with a very small hole on top. Okay, and inside the hollow object, you have like a metallic body on the surface, on the inside surface. So because of the metallic body, like it should be a metallic black body. So because of the metallic body, whatever light is absorbed from the hole, right? You have some light which will be passed through the hole. So whatever light is passed through the hole, that metallic body will absorb some of it and reflect the others, but it will reflect on the inside only. And because everywhere inside is metallic, it will constantly absorb and reflect, and that way it will finally, um, after successive absorption and reflection, no radiation will be able to leave the hole. So you can create a perfect black body. Okay. And then when the cavity is heated, radiation that leaves the hole is black body radiation. So that is how you create a black body in practicality. Although there is no such thing as a perfect black body in reality. Okay, it's a concept, like you can kind of try to reach there, but you will never reach there. Okay, so now this, I told you, this is the energy spectrum density, right? Spectral energy density versus frequency plot that you get. So people wanted to explain this plot. Okay, so let's see what were the attempts to explain this plot. So there were two kinds of explanation. One, Rayleigh and Jeans, they tried to explain the low frequency range, and Wiens tried to explain the high frequency range. But you can see that both of them failed. Okay, so Rayleigh and Jeans, they tried to explain the low. So up to this point, it explained nicely, and after that, it failed. Okay, it never went this whole way. And with Wien's law, you could explain the high frequency range of the spectral density. But then when it reached low frequency, it could not explain, and it failed. So it went like that. So what was the Wien's law, for example? The Wien's law was using thermodynamics and Stephen Boltzmann's law. He got a formula, which is U of nu comma T. So the spectral energy density is equal to A into nu cube into e power minus beta nu by T. Okay. So this expression, if you try to fit it to this curve, to the solid curve, you will see that it will fit only up to a certain frequency. After that, it will diverge. That is what happened. Okay. So it was successful fit at high frequency, but failed at low frequency. What did Rayleigh? He used frequency density and Boltzmann equipartition theory. And he came up with a formula where spectral energy density is given by 8 pi mu square by c cube into kT. Okay, K here is Boltzmann constant, T is temperature, right? So all of this. And then he also failed. Okay, so again you can see that it does well for low frequency, but at high frequency it fails. So this was a long-standing problem. Okay, so all of these two people, right? They have used the classical mechanics. So Boltzmann law and Boltzmann equipartition theory, all of these are theories from classical mechanics. Okay, so they used these and they failed. Okay, so the classical mechanics failed to explain the phenomenon. All right. So Planck came up with the idea, right? That, okay, I think that he thought that maybe the origin of the problem was that Rayleigh had assumed that the exchange between energy, between wave and matter, between radiation and matter is continuous. That is, any amount of energy can be exchanged. Okay. But then Planck came up with the idea that maybe the exchange between energy and matter is not continuous, but it is actually discrete. Okay. So if it is discrete, he postulated that the energy of radiation of frequency mu emitted by oscillating charges from the walls of the cavity must come only in integer multiples of h nu. So this is where the first idea came up, that E is equal to n h nu. Okay, integer multiples of h nu. So this means that the energy exchange is not continuous. It is always in integer multiples of h nu. Okay. So obviously here h is a universal constant, later known as Planck's constant, and n can be from 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. And h nu is the energy of a quantum of radiation. Nu is the frequency of radiation by oscillating charged particles. So like I said, in a black body radiation experiment, what you do, you increase the temperature, and then because you have increased the temperature, the electrons or the charges on the surface of the object are going to be thermally agitated. So if they become thermally agitated, they are going to oscillate. and that frequency of oscillation of the charged particles is the frequency nu. Okay, all right. But you should also remember that h nu is not going to be same for every electron, right? Depending on where the electron is, and different electron at different places might have different frequency of oscillation. Okay, but always the energy exchange would be integer multiples of h nu. So using all of these, using this assumption and solving using the methods of statistical mechanics, okay, he got the formula for spectral energy density per unit frequency. All right. So actually, you will learn how to derive this next semester. When you learn statistical mechanics, you will actually learn how to derive the black body radiation formula. So the formula is, so the spectral energy density is given by 8 pi nu square by c cube into h nu by e power h nu by kt minus 1. So this is the formula for black body radiation energy spectral energy density. Okay. So again, so this leads to your first homework. So the first homework is that you need to get the spectral energy density as a function of wavelength lambda. So this formula is in terms of frequency nu. So you need to get it in terms of the wavelength lambda. Okay. And you know how nu and lambda are related, right? Nu is nothing but c by lambda. Okay. But there is still something to it. So I want you to look it up and find out and write it down as your homework. All right. And the second homework is, so you need to show that the maximum of Planck energy density occurs for a wavelength of the form lambda max is equal to V by T. So I've already showed you the spectral energy density, right? Which is something like this. So if it is like this, and so the maximum is at this frequency nu, right? So what I want you to find out is there a relation between the maximum at which is there a relation between the frequency at which the energy spectral density will be maximum and the temperature at which the black body radiation, this graph has been obtained. Okay, so that relation is known as the Wien's displacement law. Okay, and that relation will turn out to be something like this. So I want you to derive this relation and see how you can derive this. Okay. So use the relation derived in A. So this is your lambda max. So I want you to use this relation, the Wien's displacement law, and estimate the surface temperature of a star if the radiation it emits has a maximum intensity at a wavelength of 446 nanometer. Okay. So I've given you the wavelength, then you need to find out what is the temperature of the star at this wavelength. Okay. And then also find out what is the intensity radiated by the star. So the intensity radiated by the star you can find using this Stefan-Boltzmann formula or law, where P, the total power per unit surface area emitted at the surface, that is your P, is given by sigma into T power 4. So these are your homework for this section. All right. Now let's go to the next. So I told you there were at least 3 phenomena which was not explained by classical mechanics. The first one we have already seen now, which is black body radiation. The second one is photoelectric effect. Okay. So photoelectric effect, what is that? So in 1887, Hertz discovered. So is there any question up to this point, by the way? You can let me know if you have any questions. All right, good. So next up is photoelectric effect. So in 1887, Hertz discovered the photoelectric effect. What was this? This was that if electrons So if you irradiate a metal, okay, with light, you will see that electrons are emitted out of this metal, or electrons are ejected out from the surface of the metal. This is known as photoelectric effect. Okay, so this effect, all right. So this effect also had the following observations associated with it. So the effect is basically this: you just irradiate a metal with light, and electrons will be ejected out. But then, what is the frequency at which electrons will be ejected out? What is happening there? So those are the things, observations that were made in connection with this. Okay, so there were four observations. So I'll go through it one by one. So first is that if the frequency of incident radiation, okay, is less than the metal's threshold frequency, no electron can be emitted, regardless of the radiation's intensity. Okay, no matter how intense the light is, if it is not of the correct frequency, okay, that is, if it is not of a frequency greater than the metal's threshold frequency, then no matter how strong the light is, how intense the light is, no electron will be emitted. Okay. And then the corollary of that is, no matter how low the intensity of incident radiation is, as long as the incident radiation frequency is greater than the threshold frequency of the metal, at least some electron will be emitted. Okay. All right. Then at nu greater than nu. So at the incident frequency, if it is greater than the threshold frequency, then the number of electrons ejected will depend on the intensity of light. So if the intensity of light is high, there will be more number of electrons that will be ejected. If the intensity of light is low, less number of electrons will be ejected. Okay. Then the fourth observation was that the kinetic energy of the ejected electrons depends on the frequency, but not on the intensity of the beam. So the kinetic energy depends on the frequency of the incident beam. Okay. All right. So this is your experiment, or this is the phenomena. So there is a metal. So the metal has a work function W. So by work function we mean what is the thermodynamic work needed to remove an electron from the surface of the metal into the vacuum just outside the metal. Okay, so that is thermodynamic work needed to remove an electron from surface of metal to a point in the vacuum just beyond the solid surface. So this is called the work function. So the metal will have some work function, and the work function is related to the threshold frequency. So the threshold frequency is given by work function by Planck constant. Okay, so this is your threshold frequency. So you have a metal, you irradiate the metal with certain light. So the light is of course in form of h nu. Okay, and there are electrons on the surface of the metal, right? So those electrons will be ejected if nu is greater than mu naught. Okay, and the kinetic energy of these electrons is given by h nu minus W, and W is the work function of the metal. So earlier people just observed that if you irradiate the metal with some light, electrons are ejected. They didn't know that kinetic energy is this or the incident light is this, right? They just knew that electrons are ejected. Why it is ejected, at what frequency it will be ejected, when it will not be ejected, those are things that people did not know. Okay, so that is when Einstein came up with the theory. Okay, so according to classical mechanics, any amount of energy can be exchanged with matter. And since intensity of electromagnetic wave I is proportional to amplitude square. So amplitude of the wave, the square of the amplitude is actually the intensity according to classical mechanics. Okay, so according to classical mechanics, it states that any frequency with sufficient intensity is enough to eject electrons. Okay, this is according to classical mechanics, but this is not really true. Now we know. Okay, now we know that this is not really true because if you go with the frequency, if you increase the intensity, but your frequency of irradiation is less than the threshold frequency, no matter what the intensity is, you will never be able to eject the electron. So this statement is not going to be true. At least in the case of photoelectric effect, you can see that it is not true. Okay. So in photoelectric effect, even low intensity light with correct frequency, the correct frequency is any frequency that is greater than the threshold frequency, was enough to eject some electrons from surface of the metal. Okay, so Einstein explained this photoelectric effect in 1905. Again, the key here is he assumed that the light is made up of quantum of energy. So light is made up of photons, each carrying energy h nu. Okay, so when light falls on electron, he proposed the theory that when light falls on electron, that one single h nu is absorbed by one electron entirely. Okay, so if you have that one h nu for one electron, at least one electron will be ejected. Even if the intensity of the light is low, one electron will at least be ejected. Okay, but if the nu is less than nu naught, then that nu is not enough to be entirely absorbed by the electron, and so no electron will be ejected. Okay. Then, so E is equal to NH nu, and so for high intensity light, N will be high. So if N is high, the number of electrons ejected will be high, because with one h nu, one electron is ejected. So with 2 h nu, 2 electrons are ejected. So with n h nu, n number of electrons will be ejected. So higher the n, higher the number of electrons that will be ejected. Okay. Then another thing that you can see that is if K is given by h nu minus W, okay, which is nothing but h of nu minus nu naught. Okay. Now K is the kinetic energy, and kinetic energy can never be negative. So if nu is less than nu naught, this term is going to become negative. And since kinetic energy can never be negative, this equation will no longer be valid. So basically, he's saying that kinetic energy always has to be positive, and therefore nu always has to be greater than nu naught. Okay. So what is the graph of kinetic energy with nu? So the graph of kinetic energy with nu is given by this graph. So up to a point nu naught, no kinetic energy is completely zero. And as soon as it hits nu naught, there is an increase in kinetic energy with respect to nu. And it is a linear increase, right? So this is the graph of kinetic energy of electron with respect to the frequency of the incident radiation. Okay. So this is your graph. Okay. So how they did this experiment? Okay, somebody must have measured the kinetic energy, right? That is how you know that this graph is the theory used to describe this is actually correct as per the experiment as well. So somebody must have measured the kinetic energy. So how you measure kinetic energy experimentally was you have a cathode and then some vacuum and then an anode. Okay. So the cathode and anode are placed next to each other in a evacuated glass tube. Okay. So if you shine light of certain frequency, electrons will be ejected from the cathode and they will go towards the anode. Okay. Now, if they are going towards the anode, you can measure that there is some photoelectric current between the two, because there is a flow of electrons from cathode to anode. Now, what you can do, you can vary the potential at the anode. Okay. You can vary the potential at the anode and you can try to reverse the direction of the electron. Okay. So at some voltage, okay, at some potential, the kinetic first, if you vary the potential, at some potential, the kinetic energy of electrons will slow down. But then at some other potential, it will completely reverse. So the Vs, okay, Vs is the stopping potential, that is the potential at which electrons will be turned back. And this Vs is nothing but equal to the kinetic energy, okay, because the electrons are flowing in one direction. Now you have increased the potential so much that they are flowing in the reverse direction, which means that potential at which they start flowing in the reverse direction, that is equivalent to your kinetic energy. Okay. So E into Vs is nothing but your half me V square, which is your kinetic energy. And kinetic energy is nothing but given by h nu minus h nu naught. Okay, so your stopping potential is related to your h nu minus h nu naught. Okay, so you can calculate the stopping potential and you can relate it to the kinetic energy of electron. So all of these formulas were derived by Einstein, and Einstein got a Nobel Prize for explaining the photoelectric effect. Okay. So with this, I think after this point I will stop for today. So the idea is, now you can see that here you had some light which was irradiated on the surface of a metal, and that led to ejection of electrons. Now the ejection of electrons happened only at a certain frequency that was greater than a threshold frequency. And the light that was exchanged between the radiation and the metal surface, that was in terms of NH nu. So integral amounts of, or integer multiples of h nu. Okay, so here NH nu, E equal to NH nu is an important relation. And this shows that waves also behave like particles. Okay, because the photon, each photon carries an energy of NH, carries an energy of h nu. Okay, all right. So again, there are two problems here, homework problems. So consider a 75-watt light bulb and an 850-watt microwave oven. If the wavelengths of the radiation they emit are 500 nanometer and 150 millimeter, respectively, estimate the number of photons they emit per second. Okay, so are the quantum effects important in them? So this is your question. So you have been given the power of a light bulb and a microwave oven, and you need to find out how many photons are emitted per second. And then you need to tell me whether the quantum effects are important in them or not. Okay. So this is the homework. Then second homework is, light of wavelength 350 nanometer is incident on a metallic surface of work function 1.9 electron volt. So this is obviously directly related to the photoelectric effect, right? Calculate the kinetic energy of the ejected electrons. That is the first question. And second is, calculate the cutoff frequency of the metal, right? Which is the threshold frequency. So calculate the threshold frequency of the metal. So these two are your homework problems for this section. All right. So I think I'm going to stop here. You can let me know if you have any questions at this point. I will urge you to go read the book as well. Okay. And the book has many solved problems, so you will get an idea as to how to solve these problems, and you will also be able to do the homework problems accordingly.